The distress beacon cut through the cosmic silence like a blade, its urgent pulse drawing Marcus Kane's attention to his navigation console. He'd been drifting through the void sector for 3 days, searching for salvage opportunities among the derelict stations that littered this forgotten corner of space. The beacon's origin surprised him, an old research facility that should have been abandoned decades ago. Marcus ran weathered fingers through his sandy brown hair, considering his options. At 32, he'd spent the last 8 years as an independent cargo pilot, taking whatever jobs kept his ship fueled and his conscience relatively clean. Distress beacons usually meant trouble, but they also meant potential profit if handled carefully. "Well, old girl," he murmured to his ship, the Wanderer, patting the console affectionately. "What do you think? Worth investigating?" The ship's artificial intelligence, a basic model he'd never bothered naming, responded with a series of diagnostic chirps that he'd learned to interpret over the years. The engines were running smoothly, life support was stable, and his modest weapons systems were operational. As ready as he'd ever be. The research station loomed larger as Marcus approached, its cylindrical structure scarred by micrometeor impacts and the ravages of time. Most of the external lights were dead, but a few emergency beacons still pulsed weakly in the darkness. The beacon's signal was definitely coming from inside. "Station Omega-7, this is Independent Vessel Wanderer responding to your distress call," Marcus broadcast on standard frequencies. Only static answered him. He brought the Wanderer alongside one of the station's docking bays, noting that the seals appeared intact. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't involved a hull breach. The magnetic clamps engaged with a satisfying thunk, and Marcus began the docking sequence. The station's atmosphere registered as breathable but stale when he ran his scans. Marcus checked his sidearm, a reliable pulse pistol he'd carried for years, and activated his portable scanner before crossing through the airlock. The corridor beyond was dimly lit by emergency lighting, casting long shadows that seemed to shift as he moved. His boots echoed in the empty hallway as he followed his scanner toward the beacon's source. The station felt abandoned, but something nagged at him. It was too clean, too undisturbed for a facility that should have been derelict for decades. Someone had been maintaining it. The beacon led him deeper into the station's research levels, past laboratories filled with equipment he didn't recognize. At the end of a long corridor, he found a heavy security door marked with warning symbols in multiple languages. The beacon's signal was coming from beyond it. Marcus studied the door's locking mechanism, military grade, but he'd encountered similar systems during his brief stint with the Merchant Marine. It took him 20 minutes to bypass the electronic locks, his heart rate increasing with each passing moment. Whatever was behind this door, someone had gone to great lengths to keep it contained. The door slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a chamber that made Marcus's blood run cold. It was a detention cell, but one designed for long-term containment. 3 figures stood in the center of the room, and they definitely weren't human. The women, for they were unmistakably feminine despite their alien features, stood motionless as if frozen in place. Their skin had a pale, luminescent quality that seemed to absorb and reflect the harsh lighting. Long, silver-white hair cascaded down their backs, and when they turned toward him, their eyes were the most striking shade of violet he'd ever seen. They wore simple gray garments that looked more like prison uniforms than clothing, and Marcus could see the telltale signs of restraint devices around their wrists and necks, neural suppressors, if he had to guess. The sight made his stomach clench with disgust. The tallest of the 3 stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his mind. "You are not one of them," she said, her violet eyes studying him intently. "Why have you come here?" Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "I received a distress beacon. I'm Marcus Kane, pilot of the Wanderer." "Who are you? What is this place?" "I am Nyx," she replied, gesturing to her companions. "These are my sisters, Celeste and Luna. We are Zephyrians, though I doubt that means anything to you. As for this place..." Her expression darkened. "It is our prison." The middle sister, Celeste, moved closer. She was slightly shorter than Nyx but carried herself with the bearing of someone accustomed to combat. The consortium brought us here months ago. They have been studying us. Studying you? Marcus felt his anger rising. He'd heard rumors about the consortium's illegal research programs, but seeing the evidence firsthand was different. The youngest, Luna, spoke for the first time. Her voice was gentler than her sister's, but carried an underlying strength. They are interested in our telepathic abilities. They wish to weaponize what makes us who we are. Marcus holstered his scanner and approached the nearest control panel, studying the restraint system. Telepathic abilities. We can sense emotions, share thoughts, and in some cases, project feelings to others, Nyx explained. It is as natural to us as breathing is to you. But these devices. She gestured to her restraints, they dampen our connection to each other and to the world around us. How long have you been here? Marcus asked, his fingers working at the control interface. Too long, Celeste answered grimly. They come regularly to run their tests, take their samples. But they have not returned for several days now. Marcus paused in his work. That might explain why the station seems abandoned. Maybe their funding got cut, or the authorities finally caught up with them. He managed to access the restraint controls, but the system was more complex than he'd expected. This is going to take some time. These locks are designed to prevent exactly what I'm trying to do. You would help us? Luna asked, surprise evident in her voice. You do not know us. We could be dangerous. Marcus looked up from the console, meeting her violet gaze. You could have attacked me the moment I walked in here, couldn't you? Even with those restraints, I'm betting you still have some abilities left. Nyx nodded slowly. Some, yes. Enough to sense that you are not like the others who have been here. Your intentions are kind. Then we understand each other, Marcus said, returning to his work on the controls. I've seen enough injustice in this galaxy to recognize it when I find it. Nobody deserves to be caged and experimented on. The restraint system finally yielded to his efforts, and the devices around their wrists and necks deactivated with soft beeps. The change in the three women was immediate and startling. Their posture straightened, their eyes seemed to glow brighter, and Marcus felt a subtle shift in the air around them, as if the room itself had come alive. Thank you, Nyx breathed, flexing her fingers as if testing her restored connection to her abilities. You have given us back a part of ourselves we feared was lost forever. Marcus felt a strange warmth spread through his chest at her words, and he realized she was probably sensing his emotions more clearly now. The thought should have been unsettling, but instead it felt oddly comforting, as if someone finally understood the loneliness he'd carried for so long. We need to move, he said, forcing himself to focus on their immediate situation. If this place isn't as abandoned as it seems, we could have company soon. Celeste was already moving toward the door, her movements fluid and purposeful. The main hangar is 3 levels up. There may be other ships there. We'll take mine, Marcus decided. The Wanderer might not be much to look at, but she's fast and reliable. Can you 3 handle a jump to hyperspace? We are not as fragile as we appear, Nyx assured him with what might have been a smile. Though I confess it has been some time since we experienced the freedom of open space. As they moved through the station's corridors, Marcus found himself glancing frequently at Nyx. There was something about her presence that both calmed and energized him. When their eyes met, he felt a connection that went beyond the physical, as if she could see into parts of his soul he'd forgotten existed. They reached the Wanderer without incident, and Marcus quickly initiated the undocking sequence while his 3 passengers secured themselves in the ship's passenger compartment. As the station fell away behind them, he set course for the outer system, planning to put as much distance as possible between them and any potential pursuit. Where will you go? Nyx asked, appearing in the cockpit doorway. Marcus considered the question. He'd been drifting aimlessly for years, taking whatever jobs came his way, avoiding any connections that might tie him down. But looking at her now, he realized that pattern might be about to change. I know a place, he said finally. A hidden colony where people go when they need to disappear. If you're willing to trust me a little longer, I can get you there safely. Nix moved closer, and he felt that strange warmth again, stronger now, tinged with something that felt remarkably like hope. We trust you, Marcus Kane, she said softly. More than that, I think our meeting was not mere chance. Perhaps the universe has plans for us all. The hyperspace tunnel stretched endlessly before them, a swirling vortex of blue and silver light that painted dancing shadows across the cockpit walls. Nix found herself drawn to the observation port, watching the cosmic ballet with wonder she hadn't felt in months. Freedom tasted like starlight and possibility. Behind her, Marcus worked quietly at the navigation console, plotting their course to the hidden colony he'd mentioned. The soft hum of the Wanderer's engines provided a soothing backdrop to her thoughts, so different from the harsh mechanical noises of the research station. Everything about this ship felt warm, lived in, and safe. Beautiful, isn't it? Marcus's voice drew her from her reverie. He'd moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could sense the quiet contentment radiating from him. I had forgotten, she admitted, her fingers tracing patterns on the transparent aluminum. On Zephyr, we could feel the emotions of starlight itself, each sun had its own signature, its own song. The consortium's dampeners, they stole that from us. Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Nix felt a flicker of old pain from him, memories carefully buried but not forgotten. What was it like? Your home world. A smile touched her lips as she allowed herself to remember. Zephyr was a world of crystal spires and floating gardens. Our cities existed in harmony with the planet's natural telepathic fields, we could communicate across continents with a thought, share dreams and emotions as easily as humans share words. Sounds incredible, Marcus said, and she felt his genuine fascination. What happened? How did you end up? Prisoners. The word carried more bitterness than she intended. The consortium came as traders first, offering technology and knowledge in exchange for what they called cultural research. By the time we realized their true intentions, they had already taken dozens of us. Marcus's anger flared hot and immediate, causing Nix to step closer instinctively. Among her people, sharing strong emotions was a form of comfort, of connection. She placed her hand gently on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. Your rage honors our loss, she said softly. But it also carries your own pain. You have been hurt by those who should have protected you. Marcus stiffened, and she felt his immediate impulse to withdraw, emotionally if not physically. It was a pattern she'd sensed in him since their first meeting, this instinct to maintain distance even from those he cared about. I'm not the one who was imprisoned and experimented on, he said, his voice carefully neutral. No, Nix agreed, but you were abandoned by someone you trusted. Left alone when you needed them most. She felt him flinch at her words, saw the walls he tried to build against her gentle probing. I'm sorry. I don't mean to intrude. Among my people, emotional wounds are healed through sharing, but I understand humans value their privacy. Marcus was quiet for several heartbeats, his internal struggle playing out in waves of conflicted emotion. Finally, he sighed and leaned against the observation port. My parents, he said quietly. They were researchers for the Colonial Survey. When I was 16, they took an assignment on a frontier world, supposed to be routine geological surveys. They promised they'd send for me once they were settled. Nix waited, sensing there was more. The colony was attacked by raiders 6 months later. Everyone was killed or taken. The authorities said there were no survivors, but they never found the bodies. His hands clenched into fists. I waited for 3 years, convinced they'd escape, convinced they'd come back for me. They never did. The depth of his old grief washed over her, tinged with guilt and self-recrimination that made her heart ache. Without thinking, she reached out with her restored abilities, offering comfort the way her people had done for millennia. She didn't impose her own emotions on him, but simply created a space of peace around his pain, allowing him to feel it without being overwhelmed. Marcus's eyes widened as the telepathic embrace took effect. "What are you doing?" "Sharing your burden," she said simply. "You have carried this alone for too long." For a moment, he resisted. She could feel his instinct to reject comfort, to maintain his self-imposed isolation. But gradually, his defenses softened, and he allowed himself to lean into her emotional support. "I've never felt anything like this," he whispered, wonder replacing wariness in his voice. "This is how Zephyrians love," Nyx explained, her own emotions beginning to intertwine with his. "Not just with words or touch, but with the sharing of souls. It requires trust, vulnerability, things that your experiences have taught you to fear." "And yet I don't feel afraid," Marcus said, turning to face her fully. "With you, I feel complete. Like a part of me I didn't know was missing has been found." Their eyes met, and Nyx felt the moment when his emotional barriers finally crumbled completely. The connection between them deepened, became something more than mere telepathic contact. She could sense his growing attraction to her, the way her presence soothed wounds he'd thought unhealable. In return, she allowed him to feel her own fascination with his strength, his compassion, the gentle way he'd rescued them without thought of reward. "Nyx," he breathed, his hand rising to cup her cheek. The contact sent electricity through both of them, not just physical attraction, but a recognition that went soul deep. Nyx leaned into his touch, her violet eyes fluttering closed as she savored the sensation of being truly seen, truly understood by another being. "Sister." Celeste's voice from the doorway broke the moment, though not unkindly. "Forgive me, but we're receiving a transmission." Marcus reluctantly stepped back, his hand lingering on Nyx's face for another heartbeat before he moved to the communications console. Nyx felt the echo of his touch like warmth against her skin, their connection still humming between them even as they returned to the practical concerns of their flight. "It's encrypted," Marcus said, studying the display. "But it's using old colonial survey codes, probably from your friend at the colony." The message, when decoded, was brief but urgent. "Wanderer, this is Haven Station. We've detected pursuit craft in your vicinity. Suggest immediate course change to avoid detection. New coordinates attached. Stay safe, old friend. T." Marcus's jaw tightened as he pulled up the sensor readings. He's right. 3 ships, running dark but not dark enough. They're good, but the Wanderer has better sensors than most. "The consortium?" Luna asked, joining them in the cockpit with Celeste close behind. "Most likely," Marcus replied, already inputting the new coordinates. "They must have had tracking devices we missed, or they found our trail some other way." Nyx could feel the tension radiating from her sisters, old fears of recapture mixing with newfound hope for freedom. She reached out to them telepathically, offering reassurance and strength. "We won't let them take us back," Celeste said firmly, her warrior's instincts emerging. "No, we won't," Marcus agreed, his voice carrying quiet determination. "But we need to be smart about this. The colony I'm taking you to, it's not just a refuge. It's a place where people like you can build new lives, use your abilities to help others instead of being used by them." "You speak as if you won't be staying," Nyx observed, catching the subtle shift in his emotions. Marcus hesitated, his conflicted feelings clear to her enhanced senses. "I'm not really the settling type. I've been moving for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay in one place." "Perhaps it's time to learn," Luna suggested gently, her healer's intuition sensing the loneliness that drove his wandering. "The Wanderer needs maintenance," Marcus said, deflecting. "And there are others out there who need help. I can't just abandon." "You can't abandon your mission to stay unattached," Nyx interrupted, her voice carrying gentle challenge. "But consider this, perhaps your mission was always to bring us home. Perhaps everything that came before was preparing you for this moment." Marcus met her gaze, and she felt his internal war between desire and duty, between the life he'd known and the life he might have. The connection between them pulsed with possibility and fear in equal measure. "We should prepare for evasive maneuvers," he said finally, turning back to the controls. As the Wanderer shifted course, diving deeper into hyperspace to avoid their pursuers, Nyx remained close to Marcus. She could feel his concentration as he guided them through the cosmic storm, his hands steady on the controls despite the emotional turbulence she sensed within him. "You're an exceptional pilot," she murmured, watching him work. "Comes with practice," he replied, but she felt his pleasure at her praise. "It comes with instinct," she corrected. "With the ability to feel the ship as an extension of yourself, to sense the flow of space around you. It's not unlike telepathy, in its way." Marcus glanced at her, surprised. "I never thought of it like that." "You have gifts you don't recognize," Nyx said, moving to stand behind his chair. "Abilities that go beyond the purely human. Perhaps that's why you were able to find us, why you were willing to risk everything for strangers." Her hands came to rest on his shoulders, and through the contact, she shared her perception of him, not just as he saw himself, but as she saw him. A man of quiet courage and deep compassion, someone who had turned his own pain into a drive to protect others. Someone worthy of love, worthy of the home he'd convinced himself he didn't need. "Nyx," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I know you're frightened," she said softly. "Love is terrifying when you've been alone for so long. But consider this, maybe you were never meant to carry your burdens alone. Maybe the universe brought us together because we're stronger as a pair than we ever were apart." Marcus reached up to cover her hands with his own, and in that moment, their connection deepened beyond mere telepathy into something that felt eternal. Through their joined consciousness, Nyx felt his walls finally crumble completely, felt him accept not just her love but the possibility of deserving it. "The colony is still 6 hours away," he said, his voice steadier now. "Then we have 6 hours to learn each other's hearts," Nyx replied, settling into the co-pilot's seat beside him. As the Wanderer flew through hyperspace toward their uncertain future, two souls found the courage to reach across the void between them and discover that love, like starlight, was worth any risk. Behind them, Celeste and Luna exchanged knowing looks before returning to the passenger compartment, leaving their sister to explore this new chapter of their freedom, one that promised not just escape from their past, but the chance to build something beautiful in their future. Tobias Reed stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching the familiar silhouette of the Wanderer emerge from hyperspace like a ghost materializing from the void. After 15 years of running the underground network that helped refugees escape corporate persecution, he'd learned to read ships the way others read faces. The Wanderer carried hope and desperation in equal measure, a combination he knew all too well. At 58, Tobias had seen enough suffering to fill a dozen lifetimes. His weathered face bore the scars of his own escape from corporate slavery, and his steel-gray eyes held the weight of every soul he'd failed to save alongside those he'd successfully shepherded to freedom. The hidden colony of Meridian had become his life's work, a sanctuary built in the shadow of a dying star where the unwanted and hunted could find peace. "Incoming transmission from the Wanderer," announced his assistant, Jenna, from the communications station. "Put it through," Tobias replied, his voice carrying the authority earned through years of making impossible decisions. Marcus Kane's familiar face appeared on the holographic display, looking older than when Tobias had last seen him 3 years ago. But there was something different in his eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Toby," Marcus said, using the nickname from their days working together in the Colonial Survey. "Thanks for the navigation assist. We had some unwanted company." "The consortium doesn't give up easily," Tobias replied, studying the background of Marcus's transmission. He could see movement behind the pilot, 3 figures with pale, luminescent skin and striking violet eyes. "I take it these are your passengers." "Tobias Reed, meet Nyx, Celeste, and Luna," Marcus said, stepping aside to allow the women into view. "There's Ephirians, escaped from a consortium research facility." Tobias felt his pulse quicken. He'd heard whispers about the consortium's telepathic experiments, rumors that had made his blood run cold. If these women had been subjects of that program. "Welcome to Haven Station," he said formally, addressing the 3 sisters directly. "I'm Tobias Reed, and I want you to know that you're safe here. No one will harm you or use you for their own purposes ever again." The tallest of the three, Nyx, stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his mind. "Thank you, Tobias Reed. Your intentions shine brightly, we can sense your genuine desire to help." "Telepaths," Tobias murmured, more to himself than to them. It explained the consortium's interest, and also why Marcus looked different. Being around beings who could sense emotions so directly would change anyone, especially someone as guarded as Marcus had always been. "We'll dock at Bay 7, Marcus said. "Standard protocols." "Already taken care of," Tobias assured him. "Medical screening, temporary quarters, and a full briefing on colony life. Though something tells me you three won't be typical refugees." 20 minutes later, Tobias stood in the docking bay as the Wanderer's airlock cycled open. Marcus emerged first, his hand automatically reaching back to help Nyx step onto the station. The gesture was protective, intimate, and it told Tobias everything he needed to know about how their relationship had evolved during the journey. The three Zephyrian sisters moved with fluid grace, their violet eyes taking in every detail of their surroundings. Tobias could see the wariness in their posture, the way they stayed close together despite their obvious exhaustion. These women had been through hell, but they hadn't been broken by it. "The station is larger than it appears from outside," Nyx observed, her gaze settling on Tobias with an intensity that made him feel she was seeing straight through to his soul. "We've been expanding for 12 years, he explained, leading them through the corridors lined with viewports showing the colony's main settlement on the planet below. What started as a single outpost now houses over 3,000 refugees from dozens of worlds. They pass through sections dedicated to different species and cultures, a Kron meditation garden with its crystalline formations, a Terran hydroponics bay growing familiar earth vegetables, and a vegan art studio where sculptures seem to shift and flow like living things. "It's beautiful," Luna said softly, her healer's sensitivity picking up on the harmony Tobias had worked so hard to create. "There's no conflict here, no discord. How do you maintain such peace among so many different peoples?" Tobias smiled, the first genuine expression of joy he'd felt in weeks. "Shared purpose. Everyone here knows what it's like to lose everything, to be hunted by those who see them as resources rather than people. That common experience creates bonds stronger than most realize." They reached the administrative section, where Tobias maintained his office and the colony's central records. As they entered the main room, he gestured to the massive holographic display showing the colony's current status, population figures, resource allocation, and most importantly, the location of every corporate patrol within 100 light-years. "Impressive operation," Marcus said, studying the tactical displays with professional interest. "It has to be," Tobias replied grimly. "The Consortium, Hegemony Corps, the Stellar Mining Guild, they all want what we've built here destroyed. We're proof that their rejects and discards can thrive without them." Celeste moved closer to the tactical display, her warrior's instincts engaged. "You expect them to find us here?" "Eventually," Tobias admitted. "They always do. But by then, most of our people have established new identities, new lives. They become invisible in ways that corporate databases can't track. And those who choose to stay?" Nyx asked, her hand finding Marcus's arm in a gesture that seemed unconscious but spoke volumes about their growing bond. Tobias studied the pair carefully. In 15 years of running refugee operations, he'd seen countless partnerships form and dissolve under pressure. But there was something different about Marcus and Nyx, a connection that went deeper than mere attraction or convenience. "That depends on what they have to offer," he said carefully. "The colony survives because everyone contributes. Your telepathic abilities could be invaluable, mediation, counseling, helping other refugees adapt to their new lives." "And Marcus?" Luna asked, her perceptive gaze moving between the two men. Tobias saw Marcus stiffen slightly, the old defensiveness returning. "Marcus has always been a wanderer. I've offered him a place here before, but I've always had somewhere else to be," Marcus finished, his conflict clear in his voice. "Perhaps that was because you hadn't found a reason to stay," Nyx said quietly, her violet eyes holding his with gentle challenge. The tension in the room was palpable, and Tobias realized he was witnessing a pivotal moment in both their lives. Marcus Kane had been running from commitment for as long as Tobias had known him, using his guilt over his parents' fate as armor against emotional involvement. But the woman beside him was offering him something he'd never allowed himself to want, a home. The colony needs pilots, Tobias said carefully, addressing both of them. People who can run supply missions, evacuation operations. It's dangerous work, but it's also meaningful. You'd be part of something larger than yourself. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his internal struggle playing out in the subtle shifts of his expression. Finally, he looked at Nyx, and Tobias saw something pass between them, a wordless communication that spoke of telepathic connection and deeper understanding. What would that look like? Marcus asked, his voice carefully neutral but his eyes showing the first glimmer of genuine interest. You'd have your own quarters in the residential section, Tobias explained, pulling up the colony's housing assignments. Workshop space for ship maintenance, access to our intelligence network. And freedom to come and go as missions require. Together? Nyx asked, the single word carrying layers of meaning. Tobias smiled. The colony recognizes partnerships in all their forms. We found that emotional bonds actually make our people more effective, not less. They have something to fight for beyond mere survival. Over the next several hours, Tobias gave them a comprehensive tour of the colony. They visited the residential areas where families from a dozen worlds had created new homes, the manufacturing centers where refugees used their skills to contribute to the colony's self-sufficiency, and the medical facilities where Dr. Yarim, himself a refugee from corporate experimentation, helped heal both physical and psychological wounds. At each stop, the three sisters drew attention. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to sense and soothe emotional distress in ways that amazed even the colony's experienced counselors. Tobias watched as Luna helped a traumatized Andromedan child overcome his fear of strangers, while Celeste provided tactical advice to the colony's defense force with insights that could only come from reading the emotional states of potential attackers. But it was Nyx and Marcus together that truly impressed him. They moved as a unit, complementing each other's strengths and covering each other's weaknesses. Marcus's practical knowledge of ship systems and navigation paired perfectly with Nyx's ability to read people and situations on an emotional level. They're remarkable, Jenna observed as they watched the pair work together to help plan supply routes that would avoid corporate patrols. They are, Tobias agreed. The question is whether Marcus will let himself believe he deserves this kind of happiness. As evening fell on the colony, Tobias found himself in his private quarters, reviewing the day's events. The addition of 3 Zephyrian telepaths would strengthen the colony immeasurably, but the real prize was keeping Marcus Kane. The pilot's skills and connections could help them save hundreds more refugees in the years to come. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry. "Come in," Tobias called, unsurprised to see Marcus step through the doorway. "We need to talk," Marcus said, his expression serious. "I assumed we would," Tobias replied, gesturing to the chairs near his window overlooking the colony's main settlement. "What's on your mind?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "This place, what you've built here, it's everything I thought I wanted but never allowed myself to have. And now? Now I'm terrified," Marcus admitted. "Nyx offers me something I've never had, not just love, but understanding. The kind of connection I didn't even know was possible. And this colony, the work you're doing, it gives meaning to all the running I've done over the years." Tobias waited, sensing there was more. "But what if I'm not meant for this?" Marcus continued. "What if I'm too damaged, too set in my ways? What if I hurt her by trying to be something I'm not? You want to know what I see when I look at you two together?" Tobias asked. "I see 2 people who found their missing pieces. She grounds you, gives you purpose beyond mere survival. And you give her freedom, the chance to use her gifts to help rather than be exploited." Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. "The consortium will keep looking for them. For her. Am I putting the entire colony at risk by staying? We're already at risk, Tobias said bluntly. Every day, every person we help increases that risk. But it's a risk worth taking because the alternative, letting corporate interests dictate who deserves freedom and who doesn't, is unacceptable. And if they find us? Tobias smiled grimly. Then we fight. With every skill, every ability, every advantage we have. Including 3 telepaths who can anticipate enemy moves and a pilot who can outfly anything the corporations can throw at us. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, staring out at the lights of the colony below. Finally, he spoke. I want to try. To stay, to build something with her. But I need time to adjust, to figure out how to be part of something again. Time we have, Tobias assured him. The colony has survived 12 years by being patient, by letting people find their place at their own pace. You and Nix can take as long as you need. As Marcus left to return to the temporary quarters he shared with the 3 sisters, Tobias felt a satisfaction deeper than any successful mission had ever provided. In saving 3 women from corporate exploitation, Marcus Kane had inadvertently saved himself. And in doing so, he'd given the colony its greatest asset, not just a skilled pilot and 3 powerful telepaths, but a family united by love and purpose. The next morning would bring new challenges, new refugees to help and new threats to face. But tonight, for the first time in years, Tobias Reed went to sleep knowing that the future of his colony was in excellent hands. Through his window, he could see Marcus and Nix walking together through the settlement's gardens, their figures silhouetted against the artificial sunset. Even from a distance, their connection was visible in the way they moved together, the way they seemed to share not just space but consciousness itself. Love, Tobias reflected, was the most powerful force in the universe, stronger than corporate greed, more enduring than fear. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you got to witness it transform not just 2 hearts, but an entire world.